The story of RWBY Volume 6 returns to the storytelling structure of the first two volumes, as the volume can essentially be split into sections. Of course, this isn't exactly the same as how the stories of Volumes 1 and 2 work, but more on that at the end of the video. This volume does a lot, and there is barely a time skip to be seen for the main plot that even goes past a day. We do jump around the timeline a few times for the first two episodes, but after that point, time moves like a bullet, straight and true. Before I actually get into the overall story and its progression, I want to get into the characters and what the story does with them. What's going on with the characters and how are their stories handled throughout the volume. That said, I'm actually going to change the structure of this video up a bit, and for good reason. So, without further ado, Weiss, to the surprise of no one, is who I'm going to cover first. Back in RWBY Volume 5, Weiss's story was pretty much finished by the time she arrived in Mistral, but the writers made sure there was a moment to dig into her overall story for the series by having her explain her family's situation to Yang. This volume can easily be seen as doing less than that. When it comes to all the previous volumes, they each expanded on Weiss and her situation. Volume 1 introduced how tough her childhood was because of the White Fang, and gave a small hint at Weiss having siblings. Volume 2 confirmed Weiss having a sister, and showed that Weiss isn't very stoked with speaking to members of her father's company, and potentially him. Volume 3 introduced Winter, and how Weiss looks up to her. It also gives us moments of Weiss acting distant from her father, and how she is pained to have her father force her back home. Volume 4 gives us a clear picture on why Weiss wanted to create distance between her and Jacques Schnee. Jacques uses and overly controls Weiss for his own benefit. When Weiss doesn't act to his liking, he abuses her and strips her of her inheritance. I already said what Volume 5 brings up in regards to Weiss's story, namely her mother. Volume 6, on the other hand, doesn't introduce anything new to get the audience ready for what is to come while the cast is in Atlas. Weiss, for the majority of Volume 6, expresses concerns about going back to Atlas after being able to get away from her father. RWBY, at the start, immediately makes it clear to Weiss that they are not going to leave her alone for a second, which comforts her. After learning what Oz was hiding, she starts questioning why they are still heading for Atlas. Once the ordeal with the farm is over, everyone understands that heading to Atlas is still their best option. Unfortunately, Cordovan will only allow Weiss to have transport to Atlas. As Weiss is about to say she doesn't want to go alone, RWBY reaffirms that they won't let Weiss go there and be on her own. One can say that we already have everything we need to know going forward, but there is one thing this volume could have touched on for Weiss. Klein. Klein could be discussed as a person Weiss has on her side in Atlas, and is someone she can look forward to seeing again. This could have happened in episode 9 as Weiss tells a story about how Klein can be someone she truly considers as family. I think the most interesting thing that happens for Weiss is how she reacts to finding the bodies in the Brunswick house. She has the hardest reaction to it, and it takes a lot for her to calm down. I'm willing to bet that it has to do with how close to death she was at the end of Volume 5. One thing I want to touch on before continuing is what Weiss was striving for before being taken back home. Weiss's goal, while at Beacon, was to become independent like her sister, Winter, whom she idolizes. But she doesn't want to take the same path as Winter, who became a part of the Atlas military. Weiss wants to become independent and return to take over the family business in order to right the wrongs of her father. Unfortunately, with Volume 4, she loses all of that. Her freedom is taken away, and the transfer of ownership to the SDC goes to Whitley. She now has to depend on others to get out of this horrible situation. My hope with Volume 7 on is that this aspect of Weiss gets explored and come to fruition. Blake and Yang's stories are intertwined this time around, Blake being the one at the forefront as she is the one trying to reconnect with Yang and make up for her time away. They are able to connect by the end of the volume, but the re-establishment of their relationship could have progressed better. Things start great as Blake awkwardly tries way too hard to be there for Yang when Blake needlessly helps Yang with getting a bag down. Yang then shows that there is still friction between the two of them after Blake says that she will be the one to protect Yang while on the farm. This doesn't sit well with Yang because she was the one who rushed in to save and protect Blake back at the fall of Beacon. This coming after their discussion of Adam and how they believe they both saw a hallucination of him. Once Yang finds out about Blake missing during the airship heist, she rushes to find where Blake is and finds Blake being attacked by Adam. Yang steps in to protect Blake, but also finds herself unable to handle Adam. With that, both Yang and Blake declare they will protect each other and work together to defeat Adam. Sadly, there is a bridge missing to get us across from Yang's friction to that declaration of trust. We don't get a conversation that starts the rekindling of their relationship. Episode 9 could have helped build this bridge, as the characters could have discussed the way things are between them and start finding some solace within each other. This conversation may have also had Yang talk about how people she gave a chance and trusted over recent events have either left or betrayed that trust. This would set up their declaration to Adam, among other things. It's this missing crossing point that makes their statement feel like it didn't have the proper build-up and payoff it needed to really resonate. Before I talk about RWBY, I want to cover the other characters and the overall storytelling of the volume first. There is a method to the madness here that I will clarify once I get to RWBY before my closing statements for the video. So, side character-wise, I want to talk about Maria, Oz, Crow, Jean, and Oscar. Maria turned out to be a very fun character. She is wise while being a bit off her rocker. I also absolutely love the snark and wit she has. Her eating those cashews just to piss off Cordovan is fantastic, especially after this element of their history was introduced episodes prior. That said, the way she was implemented into the story is questionable. Maria feels like a character who was shoehorned in to explain what the Silver Eyes are to RWBY because Oz is going to be indisposed for a large majority of the volume. This volume is also the first time we have heard of the Grim Reaper as a legend that inspired Crow. Plus, there isn't an explanation given as to why Maria stayed on the train. She's not senile. Yet. As it turns out, Maria was originally planned to be introduced in Volume 5. I can already imagine how this could have been done. RWBY has a chance meeting with Maria, and they have a fun interaction. During the group's training, Crow could be there and answer questions about how he got so good and the design of his weapon. Crow would reference the legend of the Grim Reaper and how this person may have originated from Mistral. He would therefore know about her due to living on the continent of Anima with the Brandwind tribe. I liked having Maria in this volume. She is a fun character and keeps a level head despite everything she learned in the early episodes. It would have definitely had been better to introduce her in Volume 5, so that her introduction in Volume 6 wouldn't feel out of place. Now I want to talk about Ozpin, or rather Oz, as I will be referring to him from now on. This volume pays off the doubt that Raven placed in Yang and the audience, as Oz continues to keep secrets and breaks his promise to Yang. First being about the relic and how it is not in a dormant state, next on how the relic attracts Grimm, and last but not least, Salem's immortality. These aren't the only lies he has told. Back in Volume 5, Oz explained that he was cursed by the gods for not stopping Salem. He is cursed to reincarnate, but it was a curse of his own making as he chose to accept the God of Light's task. Oz taking this task only so he could be with Salem, even though he was warned that Salem isn't the same as she once was. It really was a shocking turn of events to see Crow strike Oz after everything got revealed. Oz probably trusted Crow the most, and hoped he had done a great thing by giving Crow a purpose to dedicate himself to. To hear that just meeting him was the worst thing that happened to Crow must have been really devastating, since he retreats into the back of Oscar's mind. His secrets and shame lay bare, his will broken, but not completely. We later find out that he has been keeping an eye on everyone, and jumps in to assist Oscar in the crash landing of the airship. The thing about Oz that I do wonder is what he was aiming to do by keeping all these secrets. Of course, he would want them to not be known when he doesn't have a plan. This would make him look like he is doing a fool's errand, as Raven sees it. He establishes the Hunter Academies and places all the relics under lock and key. Oz does all of this as a way to deter Salem and anyone who would come after the relics. What I wonder is if everything he did was just to delay the inevitable, or to delay things until he actually came up with a plan for how to defeat Salem. If he did do these things as a way to delay until he had a plan, was he also keeping things secret so that he is the only one to bear the responsibility of Salem? Quo was the most shaken up by Oz's actions. He believed in Oz, trusted him with everything, and feeling as though he was finally doing some good in his life. Hearing that Oz doesn't actually have a plan for Salem is what sent him over the edge, plunging him into a depression that causes him to constantly distance himself from everyone, and copes by drowning his sorrows with any alcohol he can find, his self-hatred worsening as time passes. Luckily, he has RWBY. RWBY constantly tries to approach and talk to him. She keeps trying to help everyone feel better about the situation they are in, and Crow is no exception. She is able to get him on board with the airship heist, but he still keeps his distance in regards to the actual plan and its phases. Quo's drinking from the start has had a positive vibe to it, making it look like he just enjoys having a good drink, but we have had a subtle clue as to it being a problem for him back when we saw the photo he has of Team Stark. I'm definitely interested in how Crow handles things going forward, as it seems RWBY has finally broken him out of his initial depressed state by the end of the volume. Jean's storyline this time around is only for episodes 8 and 9. In these episodes, Jean learns what Oz was keeping secret and takes out his frustrations on Oscar. This being another moment where Jean's loss of control over his emotions causes him to lash out at the cause. Weiss and Yang try to quell Jean, but he doesn't listen until RWBY calls out for him to stop. Once he realizes what he is doing to Oscar, he shows an expression of remorse. Not sure of what to say, Jean leaves unable to ignore what he has learned. Upon learning that Oscar is missing, Jean begins to realize what he has done. He didn't understand what Oscar was already going through and may have just worsened it. While out looking for Oscar, Jean sits down and a familiar leaf lands at his feet. The leaf is blown away, almost acting as a guide. Jean follows it and finds himself face to face with Pyrrha's memorial statue. This moment is a callback not only to Volume 3, but also to the Volume 1 opening. In the opening, Jean looks at the statue of the huntsman and huntress located at Beacon. His expression here conveys doubt, reflecting how unsure he is in his own abilities to reach his goal of becoming a huntsman. This time, Jean is looking at a statue of Pyrrha, a statue of someone who supported and believed in him. Only, he is looking at her with sorrow and regret. Just as he is about to say something, potentially an apology, he receives an unexpected visit from a woman with red hair. They converse about Pyrrha and her aspirations of becoming a huntress, mirroring his goal of becoming a huntsman. He is reminded of what it means to be a huntsman, and comes to terms about Pyrrha's loss. Jean turns to the woman and tells her that Pyrrha did achieve her goal. She responds with happy gratitude. Their conversation is cut short as Ren and Nora arrive, the red-haired woman now gone. Nora and Ren express their concerns over the behavior Jean has shown during these recent events. Jean laments his behavior and vows to do better to serve his team and friends. Jean's story is one that I wish had more going into these scenes. Despite my breakdown here, I am a bit disappointed. The scene where Jean turns his anger towards Oscar doesn't seem like the right response Jean would give at this point, despite the things he now knows. I only wish there was more between Jean and Oz that could lead to such a negative response to Oscar. I wish there would have been a scene between the two, or from Oz, about Pyrrha, to really make this moment when Jean comes at Oscar more understandable. Oscar, like Crow, takes a heavy mental blow by what Oz was hiding from everyone. This whole situation makes Oscar start to question what is going to happen to him now that Oz's soul has merged with his body, especially after witnessing what happened to Oz's first reincarnation. Oscar's dilemma is one about whether he will lose control of his body to Oz or have his being, his soul, assimilated into Oz's, adding to the collection of people Oz has merged with. This problem worsened by Jean, who accuses Oscar of hiding things or already being influenced by Oz. Once things have settled down and everyone is off on their own, Oscar looks at the front door and contemplates leaving. Soon after, he turns up missing, although it turns out he just went to do some shopping after deciding he will do everything he can with the time he has left. Having Oscar come to this conclusion off-screen is repeating the same problem for his decision to head to Mistral he made back in Volume 4. This creates a disconnect for what was presented and the final outcome, as we are not privy to what led Oscar to such a decision. This is an important turning point for Oscar's life, and we aren't shown how he went from not being able to handle this anymore to I will see this through to the end. With that said, this exemplifies a specific part of his character. Oz explained that his soul binds itself to the body of a like-minded individual, men who have dedicated themselves to the protection of others. Oscar shares this quality as he aspired to do more than just be a farmhand. He may have tried to do great things for this world, but now finds himself having the fate of mankind on his shoulders, much more than he bargained for. His statement to continue on shows his determination to do as much good as he can, just like Oz. So, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned how this volume story can be separated into sections, which can be broken down as such. Episodes 1 and 2 deal with the battle on the train and its aftermath. Episodes 3 and 4 cover Oz and Salem's history and the fallout from everything learned. Episodes 5 and 6 deal with the Brunswick farm and the apathy. Episodes 7 through 9 get us acquainted with Argus as Jean, Nora, and Ren are brought up to speed. Episodes 10 to 13 have the airship heist and the resulting Grimm invasion. So with all that laid out, what I want to do is quickly go through each and explain what I found good, bad, and anything in between. Episode 1 is actually an episode I'm pretty disappointed with, as it skips RWBY, Weiss, and Yang meeting Blake's parents. This would have been good to deliver some character moments for Weiss and Yang. Weiss is a Schnee, and the SDC, owned by Jacques, is known for having bad relations with the Faunus. A moment for the ex-heiress of the Schnee family to meet the original head of the White Fang would have been super interesting to see. Of course, Yang meeting Blake's parents would have been good for kickstarting where the relationship is currently at, as well as there being some dialogue on Yang losing her arm to save Blake. This episode also goes to show how the rest of Team Sun should have been included in Volume 5. Episode 2 is a completely different story. This is an episode I ended up really liking. The episode sets us up with the information that Oz gave about the Relic of Knowledge that we were not yet privy to in the previous episode. The important factoids being that the relic can only answer 3 questions once every 100 years, and that the questions have all already been used. This explains why they were shocked to learn that the relics are a magnet for Grimm. As the group is getting all their stuff together after the crash, Yang is complaining about the whole situation and ends up confronting Oz about the information he chose to withhold about the relic. The great thing about the conversation is that it utilizes almost all of the characters' unique perspectives, something previously missing from the conversation scenes I talked about back in Volume 5. Yang is upset about Oz not keeping his promise to her. Weiss doesn't like how Oz was trying to make decisions for the group without their compliance. This perspective for Weiss comes from how controlling her father is in regards to her. Crow tries to stick up for Oz as he still trusts him, but also knows he can trust RWBY. And RWBY, well, she references what Oz told her about being able to have faith in humanity. The crewbie did a good job of bringing in these important perspectives. Wish there was more for Blake to add to this, but she has only recently found out about this stuff. They also added in a little something to the dialogue to give it that extra spice. Conflict. Oz and everyone else seem to be operating on conflicting interests, thus they begin to argue. Yang didn't want there to be any more lies and kept secrets, expressing her displeasure about the relic and how they kept Lionheart's treachery in the dark, while Oz wanted to do things that would potentially result in the most immediate good for the given situations. Lionheart makes sense to a point, but withholding the information about the relic in the hopes of a safer voyage was a bad call. Both of these aspects of character and conflict don't just stop here, as we will see them continue going into the next part. The start of this section gives us a ton of information about Salem and Oz. We learn how Salem and Oz met, what first caused them to separate, what happened as a result, why these current versions of humanity and Faunus exist, the official stakes of the series, and the last piece of information suggesting that Salem can't be killed. The characters now have so much information to work with from that one question RWBY asked to Jin. The characters have unfortunately focused on the shocking elements and how Salem can't be killed. There are pieces of information that I hope gets more explored and elaborated upon going forward. As stated before, this section continues the good points of episode 2. Specifically, it continues giving us the point of view of the characters. Yang is furious at Oz for how much he kept secret. Crow lost all faith in Oz, lamenting his curse and self-value, causing him to lash out and start falling into a depression. Oscar becomes extremely anxious over his entire predicament, and RWBY still tries to remain optimistic and try to make Oscar feel better by telling him that he is still his own person, which is immediately shot down by Crow. Stuff like this really helps entice the viewer in these characters and their situation. I do have to say, I wish the events of these 2 episodes would have been structured in a different way. The way episode 3 ended should have tried to include the beginning of episode 4. Just imagine watching the characters berate Oz to the point that he just shuts himself off, leaving them all alone with no answer on where to go and what to do. All I can do is imagine being left in the same place as the characters and ask, what now? The time spent at the Brunswick farm can be considered the best mini-arc of the series so far. These episodes highlight how our characters have hit their lowest point, and using the apathy as a physical representation of this is brilliant. The entire time we spend at the farm for these 2 episodes just continues to build up the mystery as to what happened here. After Weiss finds the dead bodies lying soundly in bed, and Crow finding the same in the other buildings and houses. It just begs for the audience to wonder and guess how this happened as the character explore this environment and introduce us slowly to each important element. The surprising thing is how when morning comes, the storm has ended and nothing bad has happened. Everyone is still in a dour state and doubting whether they should even continue and just abandon everything. It feels as though what they are saying is a logical endpoint that RWBY is going to convince them otherwise, until RWBY starts feeling the same. Then you realize there is something wrong with everyone's eyes, and RWBY's is the last to change. Whatever happened here is affecting their minds, causing them to truly feel like the things they have been struggling for are meaningless and don't matter. RWBY gets shocked out of this state and drops the relic down the well. RWBY, Weiss, Blake, and Yane all then go down to retrieve the relic at RWBY's behest. It is then they find out the cause as Maria finishes reading the Pharma's journal, the apathy. Due to how long this is now getting, I'm going to cut this section short and jump into the rest of the volume after stating this. This arc did great at building up its mystery and tension, making sure it gave us a proper payoff and giving the characters important, believable moments and behaviors for their given situation. Does this arc have flaws? Absolutely. But this did what it set out to do and did it well. To quickly go through the last two sections and what works and what doesn't, these episodes do a decent job at getting the audience invested in the setting of Argus. The characters explore the setting as how the city came to be, and the importance of that is explained. Important locations are shown and elaborated upon. These locations prove to be important for the story going forward. We are introduced to new characters, each with distinct personalities and ties to the group. This is way better than how the setting of Mistral is introduced and utilized. That said, these last two parts of the volume are where the storytelling begins to falter. For the introduction to Argus, I have to put the majority of the blame on episode 9, Lost, and how it focuses this concept on only one character. Everyone is lost. Everyone is unsure of what to do. This episode shouldn't have only had John find something in this city to help him press on. RWBY and Weiss should have had a discussion about Atlas. Blake and Yane should have had a conversation about their relationship, building that missing bridge. RWBY and Weiss should have separated as RWBY continues looking for Oscar, and Weiss heads back to see if he showed up. RWBY then finds him, and talks to him about what he will dedicate himself to going forward. I like him showing up in a new outfit to symbolize his decision and growth, but we needed to see how he got there. The airship heist is not a good plan. If the radar has a limited range, why didn't they just fly out and pick everyone up outside of that range? They didn't need to disable the communications tower. That's only a thing so that Blake can finally be targeted by Adam. That said, it does lead to an okay fight and a great fight. Going into the last episode in which Argus is under siege by a horde of Grimm, the stakes were definitely there as the RWBY did enough to get the audience invested in a new setting. That's why I can't believe they ruined their own stakes by having it so the Manticore Grimm swarm are no longer flying over the city and have it so the battle only takes place out at sea. This battle should have been fought on two fronts as Jean, Oscar, Crow, and Blake head into the city to fend off the Grimm there, and Nora, Ren, Maria, Weiss, Yane, and RWBY face the Leviathan at sea. Before I get into the most impactful scene for the last episode, I gotta point out this small moment for Cordovan after she is defeated. The entire time we've been with her, she has been very arrogant and self-aggrandizing. Once beaten, she immediately starts blaming our heroes for the situation against the Grimm, constantly saying, "This is all your fault" to them. The character moment she has is in the last time she says this time towards herself, because she is also to blame for acting so rashly and losing to them. I just thought this moment to be pretty cool and easy to miss. And now I get to one of the most impactful moments of Volume 6. There is no other way to kill the Leviathan or even slow it down. RWBY has to use her power. As she is about to concentrate, Yane radios her earpiece saying something is wrong, but RWBY throws it off and begins to relax. She thinks of her family, friends, and moments together. Doubt unfortunately sets in as she remembers her failures with Pyrrha and Penny. She then opens her eyes upon hearing the Leviathan's growl. The giant Grimm is looking right at her. With all the commotion and urgency of the situation, RWBY forgot that she was still carrying the relic. With some quick thinking, RWBY calls out Jin, and time freezes. RWBY just needed a moment to regain her composure, and Jin is willing to give it in only this one instance. The music moves to a crescendo, constantly rising. RWBY focuses once again on her friends and family, and the moments they've shared, finally thinking back to her mother, whom we know she cares deeply about and is inspired by. The song Indomitable kicks in. Self-realization has been achieved as RWBY lets out a burst of light from her eyes. The Leviathan immobilized, but despite her success, the Leviathan isn't fully petrified. In comes Cordovan, who finishes the beast thanks to RWBY halting its advance. This moment is fantastic. The music, imagery, and the use of previously established mechanics contribute to make for one epic moment. The only gripe I have is how the RWBY create a clash of tones once Cordovan arrives to finish off the Grim. It's too silly compared to the triumphant tone that was experienced prior. With all that taken care of, I finally come to RWBY for Volume 6. The storytelling for RWBY this volume is so far better than it was for Volume 5. I believe it was said that when the writers were planning out this volume, RWBY was written big and circled on the board, and it shows. RWBY plays an important part in each section of this volume. It starts off weak while the characters are on the train, but it instantly gets better as it is RWBY's decision to ask Jin what Oz is hiding from everyone. It is then RWBY's question to Oz about how he plans to defeat Salem that causes Crow to lash out and Oz to seclude himself. RWBY is constantly trying to make everyone feel welcome and needed, especially Oscar and Crow. It is her actions that reveal the apathy to everyone. It is RWBY's belief in others that causes the group to go along with Jean's plan to steal an airship, as well as get Crow on board by giving him a friendly jab, stating if he thinks he can keep up with him, that he should join everyone on this heist. RWBY is the reason why both Cordovan and the Leviathan were able to be defeated. That is so much more than what the last two volumes accomplished with her. One of the things I pointed out with my video on the story of Volume 5 when it comes to RWBY is how RWBY didn't go through anything. She doesn't have a personal goal. She doesn't confront anyone. She isn't challenged by anyone or anything. In Volume 6, RWBY is challenged by everything around her as her comrades in the world test her most important qualities, her optimism and will. As her friends and uncle fall into doubt and despair, RWBY still tries to remain optimistic. She still tries to push forward, even though she herself is unsure on what the best course of action is. She only knows that they can't just do nothing, which is why she still thinks they should head to Atlas with the Relic of Knowledge, going so far as to advocate for Jean's idea to steal the airship. RWBY's will ends up being tested by the apathy in Cordovan. RWBY is the last of Team RWBY to succumb to the effects of the apathy. RWBY's eyes are the last to change before the apathy are discovered. Once RWBY is shocked out of it, she doesn't lose to the effects again. She gets close, but she activates her silver eyes, stopping the apathy's effects on their minds. Cordovan's challenge on RWBY's will is to fight RWBY to the point where she would give up. But RWBY has another important quality. She is a character who will persevere. Her will to continue will not be so easily extinguished, and she will persevere through almost any adversity. She has faltered before, but she always finds a way to retain her motivation to keep going, be it on her own or through her friends. Volume 6's story is a return to form while also striving to do more. The important thing to note about the structure of this volume is how everything is a result of what happened on the train. If the aftermath of the train battle didn't go down as it did, we may have gotten a completely different story. The focus on RWBY for this volume is very welcome. It puts her into the forefront to fulfill important roles and help drive the plot. When it comes to the Silver Eyes, the RWBY did a good job making its use and implementation in the story interesting, but because of those rules, they're going to have to work hard to come up with ways to keep them interesting going forward. It's not going to be easy, and they can't retread the ground they covered this volume, as it would quickly get boring. The story for Volume 6 is one I enjoyed. Compared to Volume 5, the story feels like it is almost constantly in motion. I hope they can learn from the mistakes that can be found in this volume's story, and truly make a solid series going forward. Now, as I always end these videos, what did you think of the storytelling of Volume 6? How does it compare to the previous volumes? How well do you think RWBY was utilized this volume? What were some character moments you found great or lacking? Head to the comments below and let me know.